Welcome to the latest edition of the Legion newsletter, where I discuss all things video games, internet, and personal matters. This time we'll be talking about the Five Nights at Freddy's craze, and whether the massive hype surrounding it is well deserved. We will not be discussing the meaning behind the convoluted Bonnie's left leg meme, because, well, as far as its meaning goes, your guess is as good as mine. With the dawning of a new indie IP, Five Nights at Freddy's has received a hell of a lot of attention. It was made by Cawthon, a Christian from Texas whose previous titles had been, well, pretty shitty. With the need to choose another line of work coming dangerously close, Five Nights at Freddy's was his last-ditch effort to get back on his feet and continue to pursue a career in making video games. I don't think I have to elaborate on just how successful he was in that regard, but I will say that he certainly knows how to make lemonade with lemons, provided by the likes of Jim Sterling of Jimquisition fame, who had criticized Chipper & Sons Lumber Company by likening the characters to janky animatronic animals. Now, I'm not going to say that excuses his previous work, but I think we can all agree that his success with Five Nights at Freddy's, especially after going into such depression, was one hell of a recovery. It allowed Scott to continue his career, and he was surprisingly quick to pump out 2 sequels, with the 4th and final chapter underway and set for launch this Halloween. But is the hype surrounding the series really warranted? A lot of people seem to have, well, strong opinions on the matter, and some people certainly have taken this further than others in terms of voicing their opinions. Where have I heard this before? There's people who think it's one of the scariest games of all time, and there's people who think those people are wusses. There are people who love the gameplay, and those who think it's nothing special. There are people who think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and there are people who think those people are over-glorifying. Seriously, this sounds really goddamn familiar. As for me, I think it's pretty good. Don't close the video. Yeah, I think Five Nights at Freddy's is pretty good. Over-glorified beyond all recognition, but pretty good. Now, when I first caught wind of the game, I dismissed it as just Jumpscare Simulator 2014-2015. And looking at the gameplay, I stand by that to some degree. With the possible exception of Springtrap, I honestly don't find the animatronics to be that scary. You know, aside from the fact that the animatronics are possessed by the spirits of murdered children. Which brings us to what I'm most interested in when it comes to the games, the lore. These games actually have some very interesting lore and demonstrate that, if nothing else, Scott really knows how to tell a story. This is easily the juiciest part of the game for me, and it still fascinates me. Now, I'm not going to act like this is the greatest thing ever made. We all know that today, the greatest game ever made is Portal. And I'm not going to pretend that there aren't fans that are, well, a lot more obnoxious than others. There's tons of fan creations out there. Minecraft mods, Gary's mod content, and the Left 4 Dead 2 character pack in the footage behind me. Someone even made their own Freddy Fazbear animatronic. Seriously, go look it up. There's nothing wrong with that, but when people start to see it all over the goddamn place and can't seem to get away from it, yeah, that's when the let it go effect starts to take its toll. Rest assured that there will be no singing in this particular podcast, mind you, but if simply saying that caused you to hear it in your head, yeah, I'm just as tired of it as you are, I'm sorry. Then there are the people who never saw any good in it to begin with. Look, we all know that where there's fans, there's haters. We're all entitled to our own opinions, and the world will be a boring place if we all thought the same thing about everything. And I can see why people don't like it. Even horror fan Yahtzee Croshaw of Zero Punctuation fame didn't like it because the game did its job of scaring him a little too much. And not in a good way. Maybe you don't find it scary at all. To be honest, the worst thing about the games for me is the scream from the first game, just because it's loud, unpleasant, and unexpected. But other than that, the animatronics just look too adorable or goofy to be scary, especially in Five Nights 2. When I saw Springtrap's attack animation for the first time, I just burst out laughing. It was more adorable than scary to me. I almost wanted to pinch his supposed to be scary cheek. I wouldn't call the gameplay revolutionary, and until the summer sale, I'd held off on actually buying the games to play them myself, and only bought them on a whim. And for video possibilities. And like I said, going back to my previous point, I realize that there are a lot of obnoxious fans out there, especially the ones who are bound and determined to abide by Rule 34 of the internet. No further detail needed there, since if you're one of those people who's annoyed by the fans because they're over-glorifying it, then you're going through the same thing I went through, and indeed still am going through, in regard to bronies. Yep, we're diving into those unpleasant waters and finally addressing the elephant in the room. In fact, the Five Nights fandom is to the point where people say it's the new MLP, but you gotta remember, bronies have an alarming tendency to over-glorify MLP for everything it's not, because 4chan is so goddamn manipulable like that, but I digress. People have already made their point that MLP has no intelligent plotline and no adult humor, reaffirming that My Little Pony is nothing more than a simple, straightforward kids show for little girls who somehow attracted the polar opposite demographic. I don't understand how, but that's the internet for you. Five Nights at Freddy's is somewhat similar to that situation in that, weirdly, a lot of younger kids took interest, and needless to say, a lot of the older members of the fanbase, particularly the subreddit, resent that particular faction. Another similarity is that there are die-hard fanboys all over the damn place, some going to, well, unhealthy extremes. When it comes to going that far, honestly, keep it to yourself. That goes for any fandom, that's not mutually exclusive to bronies. I don't mind the Five Nights fan work, I think a lot of it is actually pretty cool. But why would you do that to Foxy? Why? I'm not even gonna elaborate, you know damn well what I'm talking about. That kind of thing is part of the reason why I tend to have a low opinion of human beings. Not the individual person, just people in general. I'm very Hobbesian like that. So if you're sick and tired of Five Nights at Freddy's, believe me, I perfectly understand. You have every right to be annoyed with all the exposure brought to you by hammed-up reactions from YouTube Let's Players like PewDiePie and Markiplier. I'm not gonna lie, I don't find the game that scary on the surface, and that's why I didn't think much of it until I started doing research and digging deeper. I've seen the jump scares so many times, I've just become desensitized to them. Not that all of them were that scary to begin with. Attack hog! Hello my baby, hello my darling. I will eat your face! Meow. Okay, fine, I'm done. And again, I realize that there are seriously obnoxious fans out there, and I'm just as annoyed by them as you are, trust me. It's people like them that give mediums and fandoms a bad name. Looking at you, Shrek fandom. I can see a lot of the problems you have with Five Nights at Freddy's, and I wholeheartedly respect that. You have your opinion, I have mine. I just wish a lot more bronies would realize. So is Five Nights at Freddy's scary? That's purely subjective. Some people scare easily and are absolutely terrified of the game and its jump scares, and some people will say that those people are making a big deal over nothing. Is Five Nights at Freddy's good? Personally, I kinda like it. More for the lore than the gameplay, though. Is it over-glorified? Absolutely. But at least there's actual substance to the hype. It may not be as good as a lot of people make it out to be, but it's not like they all celebrate Five Nights at Freddy's for everything it is, and like My Little Pony's non-existent adult humor. And yes, I'm an anti-brony, but I'm using MOP as a frame of reference here, to make the point that FNAF fans aren't nearly as bad as people make them out to be for the aforementioned reasons. But this isn't meant to be an anti-brony video by any means. For any fandom, I stand by this. As long as you're not shoving it down people's throats, what the hell do I care? I'll respect your opinion if you respect mine. Love it or hate it, Five Nights at Freddy's has proven to be a considerable success, and Scott Cawthon has finally proven his talent to the internet. His accomplishment is well worthy of applause, but whether the games and story are good or not is ultimately up to you to decide. Thanks for listening, and take care.